Welcome in to the Corner 3, taking you around the arc of college basketball. From the NAAC to the Pac-12, the WCC to the SWAC. We cover it all now on 93.7 The Ticket. Here is your host, Austin Oerman.
Going into year 6 in this rivalry in the state, the weird thing about this one is that on the next day, a lot of those fans will be cheering for Nebraska on the football field. That's always been a little bit bizarre to me, but you know, it is. These rivalry games are really fun for the fans. They're not very much fun for the coach.
That's Nebraska men's basketball head coach Fred Hoiberg at his press conference on Wednesday, talking about Nebraska versus Creighton. Welcome in. It is the Corner 3. I'm your host, Austin Oerman. Appreciate you being along for the ride here on a Friday night. No high school football deadline for you tonight. Championship games being played Monday and Tuesday. I know we're looking forward to carrying those here on our airwaves. Nick Sainer on the call, Jay Foreman alongside for the most part. Maybe a little bit of a rotating cast of characters, but definitely stay tuned here to 93.7 The Ticket to find out more. We'll bring you, as far as I know, every class, all the games Monday and Tuesday, so I'm going as long as I want. Just kidding. No, I'm not. Got about an hour with you here before we get you on to maybe not bigger and better things, but other station content here. Give me a follow on Twitter at Austin_Oerman. Interact with the show. Really appreciate hearing from you guys. Positive feedback, negative feedback, what I got right, what I got wrong. Hit me with it all. I'll take it. I love being around to chat with you guys as well. After this is done, after this airs, you'll hear from me from the CHI Health Center up in Omaha. It is Nebraska Creighton tonight. The women's teams played at DJ Sokol Arena earlier today. Obviously, at the time of the recording, I do not know the final score. So here's to a Husker win. Coming up again after you're done with this show, we'll have Nebraska Creighton men's action from the CHI Health Center. I believe we have some post-game coming your way. At the very least, I'll do my normal post-game video. Want your reaction, though, on the text line 402-464-5685. And again, on Twitter, it's right below me, right on top of my chin, right here, at Austin_Oerman on Twitter. Interact with me, interact with the Corner 3, and, of course, on the block from 2 to 4 weekdays. Eric Strickland and I talked a little bit more about this game earlier today. But I thought I could bring you a bit of a mega preview. Here in this first segment, what we'll do is we'll go over the recent history in the series, some of the notable games, the notable trends to keep in mind. Second segment will be a replay of a conversation that Strick and I had with Jon Walker of the Omaha World Herald. He's the Creighton beat writer. We'll get into the weeds about Creighton there, and then we'll wrap up with some of the key matchups, key things to watch for in tonight's game coming up at 7 o'clock Central. All right, let's get into it. Not a good recent series for Nebraska. Over the last 5 years, Creighton leads the series 4-1, and they're averaging a 20-point win. Creighton has won games by 29 points in Lincoln, by 24 points in Lincoln, by 19 points in Omaha, but then only by 8 points in Lincoln as part of the Gavitt games. If we look back over these last 5 years, that 8-point win came in 2021. That's been the only matchup of these two schools as part of the formerly Gavitt Games matchups between the Big Ten and the Big East, a series that really needs to come back. I know it's been put by the wayside, but Nebraska played Seton Hall at least once. I know Nebraska played Villanova in that matchup, St. John's a couple times, and then Creighton. And I think those were the 5 matchups because if memory serves, let me just get this pulled up so I don't speak out of turn. Let's see here. Yeah, the Big Ten went 3-1 in the Gavitt games. Yeah, Nebraska played in 5 Gavitt games with 3 did not participate. Nebraska, Illinois, and Wisconsin all went 1-4 in their 5 appearances in the Gavitt games. Nebraska beat Seton Hall for its 1 win, lost twice to St. John's, lost to Villanova of all schools, and then also lost to Creighton in this 8-point game back in 2021. 2 years previous to that was a Creighton romp in Omaha, 95-76. Same 19-point margin that Nebraska had actually beat Creighton by in Lincoln the year before. That was a 94-75 Nebraska win in Lincoln. I was there covering that game in a previous life, and it was kind of hard to keep the emotions under control on air when I went on to react about that game, right? Got to be neutral, got to find a way to break yourself of a lot of the bias. No we's, no us's, no ours, no team, whatever. But I remember sitting there in the arena watching that 19-point Nebraska win in 2018, just reveling in it, trying to keep myself under control. But Creighton returned the favor the next year and then one upped it the year after that. Creighton in the top 10 in 2020. This is before right before. After the world shut down. Yeah, that's how that works. After the world shut down, Creighton won by 24 points. That was a top 10 Creighton team, ranked number 8 at the time. Creighton was actually unranked coming to Lincoln in 2021 in that 8-point win. But then the last 2 years, I think, are really worth getting into here. Let's start with the last time that this game was played in Omaha. It was a Nebraska win. Back in 2022, Nebraska took down Creighton 63-53. This was still a top-ranked Creighton team at the time. And I remember going into this game, there was a lot on the line for both teams, right? Nebraska was at 5-3, Creighton was at 6-2. One of the more loaded Creighton rosters of recent times, right? Obviously, still led by Ryan Kalkbrenner. You had Trey Alexander as a sophomore, Baylor Shireman in his first year back at Creighton. Ryan Nemhard was a sophomore. The big get of Arthur Kaluma for them too, right? Waiting for that year 2 breakout in Omaha. Francisco Farabello as the ad in the offseason for them, senior guard. And really it was Farabello that kept Creighton in that game. Farabello did a fantastic job shooting the ball and keeping Creighton alive. Creighton shot only 10 of 40 from 3 in the game in Omaha 2 years ago. Farabello went 5 of 9. He took 10 shots, 9 of them from 3, made 5 of them, including an and one, a 4-point play. He made the free throw. That's really all he did. 16 points, 1 rebound, 1 steal, and a turnover for him. More instructive is what Nebraska did to the starters. Ryan Nemhard, 3 of 13 overall, hounded by a combination of Emmanuel Bandamel, C.J. Wilcher with him at times as well. 3 of 13, 3 of 7 from 2, 0 of 6 from 3-point range, 4 assists and 4 turnovers for the point guard. Baylor Shireman had a rough day, only 2 of 9 from 3, missed his 1 free throw attempt, but he did still have a pretty decent game. 10 points, 11 boards, 5 assists, and also 4 steals, but counteracted by 3 turnovers, and again, the 2 of 9 from 3-point range. Kalkbrenner was basically a non-factor in the game, which again is weird to say for a guy that was a double-double, but we'll get to the reason why. It felt like Kalkbrenner was at least negated, if not even closer to a non-factor in this game. 10 points, 10 rebounds, couple assists, a steal and a block for him. 5 of 7 shooting from 2, 0 of 1 from 3, 0 of 1 at the free throw line. But Nebraska limiting his touches, forcing the perimeter players to beat them, was the key for Nebraska the last time out in Omaha. Trey Alexander also just a 3 of 12 night from him, but he made 3 of Creighton's 10 threes on 3 of 8. Then Arthur Kaluma didn't make a shot from the floor. Only 2 field goals and not a very impactful game outside of that. So really it was Farabello and a little bit from Shireman and Kalkbrenner that was the group for Creighton that kept the Blue Jays in it. But let's take a look at Nebraska. How did the Huskers find a way to get the job done when the Huskers turned the ball over 13 times, just 1 fewer time than Creighton? Huskers pulled down 39 rebounds to Creighton's 35. That doesn't hurt. Only 9 personal fouls throughout the game for Nebraska. That goes a long way. You can't say it was the 3-point shooting that did it for Nebraska. Creighton 10 of 40, Nebraska only 3 of 12. But where Nebraska went to work was in the paint, behind Derek Walker. 11 of 16 from the floor for Walker, 22 points as well as 8 rebounds and 2 assists, and still probably the best game that Sam Griesel's played in his life. Probably the best game of his Nebraska career. Griesel shot 7 of 13 overall. He was 6 of 12 from 2 and did hit a 3-pointer as well on his way to 18 points. He had 12 defensive rebounds, 7 assists, and 2 steals. This was the Sam Griesel masterpiece game. Sam Griesel took Ryan Nemhard, took Trey Alexander, not as much Baylor Shireman, but specifically Nemhard and Alexander to the post time and time again. Derek Walker found a way to get Ryan Kalkbrenner out on the perimeter, drive, hit him in his chest, knock him back, and finish at the rim. I have my own qualms with how Derek Walker finished at the rim for his Nebraska career, but in that game against Creighton, 11 for 16, basically all at the rim, basically all being defended by Kalkbrenner or even a little bit of Frederick King, who still had some size, some height at least on Derek Walker. What a fantastic game for him. He led the way with the 22 points, but again, it's the Sam Griesel game with 18, 12, and 7. Even Juwan Gary, 12 points, a perfect night from the floor, 9 rebounds for him. Emmanuel Bandamel pitched in, 4 points, 3 steals, and 5 rebounds. Not a lot from the bench. Only 5 total bench points for Nebraska. You really only get 34 bench minutes from Nebraska out of the 200 that are available. 3 points for Wilhelm Breidenbach on 6 shots, and Keisei Tominaga only had 2 points on 5 shots, didn't even attempt a 3. One of the biggest, you'd say team wins, right, especially defensively, but it was a 2.5-man show for the Huskers offensively with the 22 from Walker, the 18 from Griesel, and the 12 from Juwan Gary, combining for 50 of Nebraska's 63 points. We'll get more into this game later because I think it's a little bit instructive for what Nebraska might need to make happen in tonight's matchup at the CHI Health Center. That game that Nebraska won 63-53, also up in Omaha just for kicks and gigs. Let's just say the good times didn't last the next year. Creighton comes in to Lincoln and wins in 2023, final score of 89-60. And the game probably wasn't even that close. It was a systematic dismantling by Creighton. They put up 52 points in the first half and lead by 15 at the half, and then they outscore Nebraska by 14 after the break. The only thing Nebraska did better than Creighton was turn it over on a lower number of their possessions. Creighton's offensive rating was 122, where 100 is average. Nebraska's was basically as far below average as Creighton's was above. Huskers put up an offensive rating of only 82.3. Things changed, right? Stephen Ashworth comes in, kind of does the Francisco Farabello thing. He was 3 of 7 from 3. Farabello was, of course, still on that team last year, but he was only 2 of 3 from 3 a year after being 5 of 9. It was the Baylor Shireman show. 6 made 3-pointers. Not maybe the most efficient day for him. He was only 6 of 19, but he led Creighton with 24 points. You get 13 from Ashworth. You get 13 from Trey Alexander. And then you also get 13 from Ryan Kalkbrenner alongside 12 rebounds and 3 block shots for him. This, to me, was a credit to Creighton, right? They go 14 of 40. That's an even 35% from 3. This was more about what Nebraska didn't do. Huskers go only 2 of 22 from 3-point range. Rink Mast makes one. Keisei Tominaga makes one. Huskers only shoot 45% from 2 and 34% for the game. And it wasn't really even a stifling defensive performance by Creighton, I didn't think. It wasn't like Alexander just had, Keisei Tominaga locked up, right? Kalkbrenner used his length to bother Rink Mast a little bit. Josiah Alec took 10 shots, including 4 threes. That's not really going to go over well for Nebraska. Bryce Williams only took 7 shots. A lot of Trey Alexander on him with some Baylor Shireman as well. There was only one Husker in double figures against Creighton last year. Of the 60 points that Nebraska scored, 20 of them, 20 of the 60, came from Keisei Tominaga, who was 7 of 12 from 2, 1 of 4 from 3, and 3 of 4 at the free throw line. Nebraska was out-rebounded by 11. Creighton had 17 assists on 32 made field goals. Nebraska, meanwhile, only had 6 assists on 24 made field goals. A lot of those, obviously, from Keisei Tominaga having to do a lot of it himself. Because Creighton did a good job of disrupting and denying some of those easy passes that started the Nebraska offense. Only 8 turnovers for the Huskers against the Blue Jays last year, but Nebraska never got comfortable. But it wasn't even so much the offense, it was the defense. What Creighton did offensively last year led to one of the worst defensive performances I remember seeing from a Nebraska team. Credit Creighton, right? Ashworth did a great job of moving without the ball. Shireman hit some from the freaking parking lot. But the play that will always stick out to me was Trey Alexander gets the ball on the right wing. He drives right. He finds himself basically under the backboard. He jumps in the air to make a pass, but instead of the ball going to the corner, right? When a guy drives from that angle, you think he really has 2 passes. Maybe he can get a wraparound to a rolling big man, or he's going to try to hit the corner. What Trey Alexander did was he left his feet, he started to pass, but he kept going, turning his body, and whipped it basically straight back to where he came from. I believe it was Shireman that hit the 3. It might have been Ashworth, but I'm pretty sure it was Shireman. moving without the ball. What that did, maybe they drew it up, maybe that's how they saw it, or maybe it was just an instinctive basketball play by Trey Alexander. But what that play was short-circuiting Nebraska's defense because it skipped steps. Nebraska was slow in rotation when it even got to rotations last year, but Trey Alexander said, we're not even going to worry about the extra passes. I'm going to make an incredible play on my own. There is no defense for that. There's no defense for that. With the way Nebraska plays, it would have taken an incredible read and probably seeing it on film for Nebraska's defenders to rotate to that pass the way that they were unable to. I don't even know if like a Houston or an Iowa State is making that rotation unless they have just an instinctual guy making a gamble. But it was just indicative of, yeah, Creighton is playing mind games with Nebraska. They are so far ahead, at least at that point last year. And that game that Creighton won in Lincoln was Nebraska's first loss of the year. Nebraska was 7-0 going into that game. That runway that Strick and I talked about quite a bit last year, it really came to a head against Creighton. It exposed some issues for Nebraska, and obviously they learned from it and they got better. Like I said, over the last 5 years, it's a 4-1 series lead for Creighton, but there's one other piece to look at here. Nebraska coming off an NCAA tournament appearance. Creighton has been the more regular staple in the NCAA tournament, but I thought it would be interesting the year after, with Nebraska coming off an NCAA tournament appearance, how do those games normally go? Well, it's happened 8 times. 7 seasons, but 8 different games. I'll get to that here in a sec. Nebraska's actually 6-2 against Creighton coming off an NCAA tournament appearance, and 2-1 in Omaha, where tonight's game is going to be played. Average score of these games, 76-68 in favor of Nebraska. First time we had this matchup was in the year 1986. I'm pulling up everything just to make sure I get my facts straight here. So Nebraska and Creighton meet in Omaha on December 6th of 1986. So 8 months after the 86 NCAA tournament that Nebraska qualified for. Creighton wins that game by a dozen in Omaha, but those two teams actually played in the regular season a second time. Just about a month later, a couple days after the new year, Creighton made the trip down to Lincoln, and Huskers prevailed 70-65 in overtime. So that's a win and a loss for each, sitting at 6-1. Then it got fun for Husker fans. It got really fun for Husker fans. Nebraska makes the 1991 tournament. They turn around and win the 1991 regular season meeting 90-85 in Omaha. 92, Nebraska makes the tournament, ranked number 25, welcomes Creighton to town. Blue Jays put up 83, but Huskers hit the century mark, 100-83. Nebraska beats Creighton in 92. In 93, it was a 2-touchdown Nebraska win in Omaha, 67-53. And then in 94, it was 85-57. Nebraska, one of the biggest wins for the Huskers in series history in Lincoln. The winning streak against Creighton at that point in 1994 was, let me do my math, they won in 90, 91, 92, 93, 94. That was the 5th of a 7-game winning streak against the Jays for the Huskers. They would win again in 1995. Nebraska didn't make the tournament in 95, though. An 88-67 win for Nebraska. They didn't play in 96. The 7-game win streak would continue to the 96-97 season. Nebraska and Creighton meet in January of 97. So it's a 71-52 win for the Huskers. A 7-game win streak with all but 2 of those games coming, or all but 3 of those games, I guess 4 of the 7, coming after Nebraska made the NCAA tournament. The other occurrence of this game coming after Nebraska made the NCAA tournament was in 2014. It was a 65-55 Creighton win over Nebraska in Lincoln in that 2014-15 season. So tonight's matchup will be the 9th time that these teams meet immediately following Nebraska making an NCAA tournament. Nebraska sits at 3-1. Creighton still undefeated, but with a couple of common opponents. That's what we're going to get to in our next segment. Big thanks to Jon Walker of the Omaha World Herald. He stopped by On the Block at 2:30 yesterday. Make sure you check out the podcast version of On the Block. If you find On the Block, you can also find the Corner 3 with basically no problem. So we'll go to break. When we get back, we'll replay the conversation that Strick and I had with Jon Walker of the Omaha World Herald right here on the Corner 3.
It's the fall sports season, and that means that the school year is back in session and you're planning road trips for Nebraska football games and following your kids around to their different events. Stop telling yourself you'll upgrade your car someday and do it now. Mullen Motors Lot is full of great vehicles to take home so you don't have to worry about your current car struggling through another season. Come check out their lot just north of 48th and Lake and find your next ride. As your fall schedule gets busy, you'll need a reliable way to get to your destinations. Mullen Motors.
No taglines, just quality vehicles. Mullen Motors.
I'm softball player Jordy Ball, and I'm proud of my Nebraska roots, and I'm proud to be back home. And at Midwest Bank, they're proud to be your local community bank. They believe in family first, taking initiative, showing integrity, and rolling up their sleeves to support their local communities. They treat everyone like family, no matter where you're from. Whether you walk into a branch in York, Lincoln, Norfolk, or Pierce, you know you're going to be welcomed with a smile. Your community, your bank, Midwest Bank.
Looking for a place to relax and unwind after a busy day? Cigars Lounge at 8th and Q in the Haymarket is the perfect place to enjoy good company, a cocktail, and of course a cigar. Visit Cigars Lounge on Tuesdays for Top Shelf Tuesday and enjoy 50% off select spirits. Cigars Lounge offers Perdomo, San Cristobal, Rock Patel, and more of the top stogie brands that you know and love. But that's not all. If you mention this ad between noon and 5 p.m., you'll receive 15% off your entire tab just by mentioning the ticket. Check out Cigars Lounge today at 8th and Q in the Haymarket.
All right, Rico, let's do the final checklist before we head out. We have a lot of people coming to the tailgate today.
I'm ready.
Burgers?
Check.
Chips?
Check.
Icy cold beer?
Check. Except this one.
I'm forgetting something. Wait a second. Where's the Führer's cheese spread?
I can't stop eating it.
Rico!
Relax. I always pack extra. It's the biggest hit of the tailgate.
For the best appetizer, party dip, and tailgate snack, load up on Führer's cheese spread today in most local grocery stores.
Back to the corner three on 93.7 The Ticket. Here is your host, Austin Oerman.
We're going to talk some hoops here. We're going to talk some Nebraska Creighton. To do that, we go to our VIP line brought to you by our friends at Outlet Fiber. That's where they understand the importance of exceptional service with local heart. First-time guest on the program, Jon Walker of the Omaha World Herald. Jon, thanks a ton for spending some time with us here today. Really appreciate it, man. How you doing?
Man, I'm good. It's rivalry week. I've been at the World Herald for I guess my year anniversary at the World Herald is in less than a week now. And so I was fortunate enough to get last year's I-80 rivalry game in. But now that I've been here a year, I'd like to think I'm pretty entrenched in it. So I'm excited. One, for the game Friday, and two, to be talking to you today.
Well, Jon, you are truly entrenched now because you have recently discovered the depths of emotion behind the word J-Sker. You didn't get that last year?
See, and I saw somebody said the same thing on Twitter X earlier. They were like, "Man, you were here last year, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, I was," but I think I had been hired for like a week and a half at that point. That was only my second game on the beat, believe it or not. And so no, I don't know if it was like I hadn't fully made it to Creighton Twitter yet or Nebraska Twitter. But I sure have this year, and it has been quite the ruckus ever since Monday morning.
Are you appreciative of the fact that you found out what Nebraska and Creighton Twitter are all about, or do you wish you would be naive and innocent still like you were, a year ago now?
No. I love it. I love nothing more than an absolutely vile college basketball rivalry. And that's exactly what we have in our hands here on each end of I-80.
It's been pretty one-sided over the last handful of years. We'll get to the men's game in just a second. But, of course, the women will take center stage first at DJ Sokol Arena. We've talked a little bit about the Nebraska end of things here on the program. Natalie Potts goes down with the ACL injury for the year. But for Creighton, right, maybe not the start that the Blue Jays envisioned. That's been a solid program. They're off to a 1-2 start. Let's start with what's gone wrong, I guess, in the 1-2 start for the Blue Jays first.
Yeah, it's really kind of been their lack of a post presence. I don't think it's a secret. I think everyone who has remotely paid attention to Creighton women's basketball knows that they lost Emma Ronsick. Otherwise, returned a lot from this kind of now super senior class, if you will. But Emma Ronsick was a really, really, really important piece, and I think we're seeing that now, just how important she was on both ends as a post presence. And so the Jays haven't really had that. Morgan Molly is really good, but we saw against South Dakota State in their opening night loss. We saw against, which this is going to be the case for most teams in the country, but when the Jays went to Manhattan to play Kansas State, Aoka Lee had her way in the post, really. And that's kind of been the Achilles heel of this Creighton team so far.
On the flip side of that, the guard play, right? Lauren Jensen's been really good.
Yeah.
You mentioned Morgan Molly, Keani Lockett. Those three players are in double figures. What makes that triumvirate so good for Creighton?
Yeah, they were actually, this is kind of an anticipated but late breakout for Keani Lockett. Not by any volition of her own. She dealt with some injuries last year, and Jim Flannery knew it then that, man, if we could just have Keani. And so now you're seeing why he said that a year ago and how important she could have been to the Jays a year ago, how important she is now. And then, Molly Mogensen, Lauren Jensen, those are two players who have, kind of paved the way for this Creighton offense, especially on both, but on both ends, for the last 4 years, now going on 5 years. So no, they're second to not a lot. I won't say second to none, but Lauren Jensen, especially, second to not a lot.
Both programs, Nebraska and Creighton, wanted Britt Prince. How fired up do you think she's going to be playing for Nebraska against the Creighton team with a lot of connections to her mom, that program there at Elkhorn North, and everything that goes on in that matchup?
Yeah. I think the cool thing is that her introduction to this rivalry, obviously she's been around it. She's an in-state kid. She knows, but her formal introduction to this rivalry is going to come on the road, which I think is maybe more fitting because she gets to go back home, essentially. I understand that the drive from Lincoln to Elkhorn is not sizable, obviously. But it's really cool that Britt Prince is kind of going to have this homecoming of sorts on Friday night. I am really, really, really excited to see what Creighton does and how they defend her. Is that Lauren Jensen? Is it Keani Lockett until it's not? I'm not sure. We'll find out on Friday.
Nebraska is going to play through Alexis Markowski. So is the game plan for Creighton, the women, the same as it is for the men? Let it fly from three and try to outmath Nebraska from beyond the perimeter?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. The Creighton women have done a really good job through their first 3 games of not settling for what the defense is giving up. Like, they're not just going to chuck them just because they're open, if that makes any sense. They still want to get really quality shots, but that's the game plan. Absolutely. Exactly as you said, with the men. Just like Fred Hoiberg and co, I'm sure, are going to crash down on Ryan Kalkbrenner every time. The Jays are probably going to try and do the same to Alexis Markowski. So I think the Huskers will have to hit threes too, but absolutely. The Jays are going to have to hit from 3 to kind of make up for the lack of a really bruising, really intimidating post presence that they lost in Emma Ronsick.
We're talking with Jon Walker of the Omaha World Herald. He's the Creighton beat writer. Let's talk about that men's game. Watching Ryan Kalkbrenner now for the second season, have you seen him level up, or is he just Mr. Consistent, same guy he was last year?
No, he's leveled up. It's kind of double-sided. It's really easy to not have to score 49 points in a game when you also have Trey Alexander and Baylor Shireman there. So his workload is vastly different, vastly larger than it was a season ago. But he dedicated this offseason to making sure he could handle that. We all know what type of rim protector he is. He is one of, if not the best rim protectors in the country. And so he really dedicated this offseason to improving his all-around game, and we've seen it. His footwork has been smoother. He's looked more confident taking threes. It's a quicker release from outside. Creighton hasn't played anybody who could body for body match up with Ryan Kalkbrenner because it's so hard to do talent-wise. But Nebraska is gonna be the first team to kind of be able to throw an adequate body at Ryan Kalkbrenner with Braxton Mia.
And Nebraska has really, I think, three different kinds of postmen, right? You mentioned Mia. I think Andrew Morgan will get some looks at him as well. Berke Boyutengel. How is Creighton preparing for maybe the different styles of player that Nebraska is going to throw at their best player, Ryan Kalkbrenner?
You know, I think it's really as simple as, go back to a couple of minutes ago. They have to hit threes. I think it's more of a philosophical thing, schematic thing. Like Fred Hoiberg designed that, hey, we are not going to let the 7-footer beat us at the rim. And, to the Huskers' credit, Ryan Kalkbrenner's first paint touch didn't come until 10 minutes in last year. So they executed that plan early on, and obviously the Baylor-Shireman avalanche spread the Huskers out, then you could feed it in, and so on and so forth. So just like we said with the women, I think the key to handle whatever matchup, whatever scheme, whatever philosophy Nebraska is going to throw at Ryan Kalkbrenner, I think the Jays have to hit threes. Have to. We saw 2 years ago that when Nebraska makes it a slugfest and when Creighton doesn't make shots, Nebraska has a chance in these games. When Creighton hits shots and settles into their offense, that's kind of when they can boat race the Huskers.
Creighton 4-1 in the last 5 matchups, winning by an average of 20 points, to your point. You brought up the name Trey Alexander. Has Creighton replaced him with a single player, or has it been more by committee?
Yeah, it's had to be by committee. Pop Isaacs, it's still kind of, he had a torn labrum last year in his hip at Texas Tech and had surgery on it this off season. So this is his first season with that repaired in like a year and a half, 2 years. And so he's still understandably getting his feet under him, if you will. But one of the big knocks on his game in the portal was his efficiency numbers at Texas Tech. They weren't where Tech needed them to be. They weren't where he wanted them to be. But the whole point of Greg McDermott bringing him in, both from Pop's standpoint and from Creighton's, they think that in McDermott's system, Pop will get better looks, which will improve the efficiency numbers. He hasn't, he's shooting 33% right now. And so for the time being, it has not just been as simple as Pop Isaacs replacing Trey Alexander. But in that same vein, their most recent game against Kansas City on Saturday, 5 different players scored in double figures, and freshman Jackson McAndrew led the team with 15 points. So it hasn't been just one person replacing the scoring that they lost in Trey Alexander and Baylor Shireman, but they have seemingly somehow done it, still averaging 88 points a game.
You bring up the name McAndrew, one of, if not the highest rated signee in Creighton history, correct?
Yep.
How has Greg McDermott managed his minutes, along with, Isaac Trout, an in-state transfer home from Virginia, and then Jason Green as well at that power forward position?
Yeah, it's been really interesting because, throw in Mason Miller to that conversation. The interesting thing is that Mason had a leg injury, a pretty significant leg injury over the summer, missed a lot of time, was back for camp, sat out a little bit of camp because that started to nag him from my understanding. And then he's missed the past couple of games. I don't think the past couple of games are related to the leg injury. But he's missed the past couple of games. And so Greg McDermott said, it's kind of made my life easier in terms of figuring out that rotation, because when Mason's 20 minutes are available, then, we can give 10 of those to McAndrew and an extra 5 to Isaac Trout and Jason Green. And it's a night by night, matchup by matchup thing is how they rotate on the wings. Because all 3 of those guys bring something different. I think we'll see a lot of Jason Green. I really do, because of the defensive presence. Creighton's going to give up a lot of size in the backcourt, especially. Berke and Isaac Trout kind of cancel each other out. They're both 6'10". Mia, Kalk, they're both 7'1". But the backcourt, 1 through 3, is really where Creighton's going to be at a size disadvantage. And so I think that you could see Green, a versatile defender, kind of help fill that void. But they all bring something a little different. And to your point about McAndrew, there's not any hesitation. This coaching staff has really full confidence in him. He was 0 for 7 2 games ago against Houston Christian, and they just encouraged him to keep shooting it. What happened Saturday against Kansas City? Well, he sees his first couple go down, and boom, he leads the Jays with 15 points.
One more guy I think Husker fans need to know about before tomorrow night's game at CHI, John, is Jemiah Neal, big-time transfer out of Arizona State. When you mention the backcourt, when I see that he's 6'6" and Bryce Williams is listed at 6'7", I see a fun head-to-head battle between those two guys tomorrow night. Are you kind of on the same wavelength?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's going to be the matchup. Nebraska comes down the floor for the first time. I think Jemiah Neal is glued to Bryce Williams. One, because Jemiah was touted in the transfer portal as a guy who was, one, a slasher, but more importantly, a hard-nosed, menacing defender. And then for personnel-wise, what are you going to put 6-foot Stephen Ashworth or 6'2" Pop Isaacs on, 6'7" Bryce Williams? You're probably not going to have a favorable matchup there. You wouldn't. And yeah, so I think you'll see Jemiah on Bryce a lot of the night. But in addition to his defense, one of the things that Jemiah has done really, really, really well is, again, that slashing ability, especially in transition. Sometimes Creighton's offense has had some cold spurts, and the transition game has really, really kind of kicked them back into gear. And Jemiah Neal has been a large part of that.
He's averaging just under 10 points per game, but also 4.5 assists per game. When you look at this Creighton offense, is he kind of that secondary playmaker? Or is he the primary guy even before like Ashworth running around screens? Or how often is Creighton playing through Jemiah Neal getting downhill versus Ryan Kalkbrenner as that distributor?
Yeah, so it's so interesting, and that's the thing about Creighton's offense that makes it so difficult. One possession, they're going to come down the floor, and Ryan Kalkbrenner is going to trigger the offense at the top of the key. He'll set a screen. It's a DHO. It's a dribble handoff. It's you name it. The next possession, they come down, and it's a pick and pop with Ryan Kalkbrenner and Stephen Ashworth. And then what do you do? Like it's so different. But in terms of that playmaking ability, yeah, I would say it's tough. The inefficiency so far probably knocks Pop Isaacs down a bit in that category. But yeah, Pop and Jemiah are probably the playmakers here, especially on the wing. It'll be, size-wise on Friday, it'll be Jemiah, I'd imagine. But yeah, he's a playmaker for sure. The thing that Greg McDermott wants is him to stop being so hesitant. That's one of the things we've seen through the first 4 games is he'll get it, and it almost seems like he's in his head because he wants to do the right play when he just has to make the right play instead of thinking about it. And that's kind of the point that Greg McDermott's reiterated, that Jemiah Neal himself has reiterated, and something we'll have a chance to see on Friday.
That's Jon Walker of the Omaha World Herald, Creighton beat writer with us here. Give him a follow on Twitter at @byJonWalker. Read his work at omaha.com. John, appreciate you taking some time out of your day to preview the matchup with us. Really appreciate it, and we'll see you at CHI on Friday.
All righty. Thanks, y'all.
That's, again, Jon Walker joining us from the Omaha World Herald via our Allo Fiber VIP line. Allo Fibers, where they understand the importance of exceptional service with local heart. Nebraska women take on the Creighton women mid-afternoon at DJ Sokol Arena, then a 7 o'clock tip at the CHI Health Center between the men's teams, both games tomorrow night. I'll be there. It's going to be fun. Make sure you give me a follow as well at Austin_Oerman for some in-arena coverage.
It's the fall sports season, and that means that the school year is back in session and you're planning road trips for Nebraska football games and following your kids around to their different events. Stop telling yourself you'll upgrade your car someday and do it now. Mullen Motors Lot is full of great vehicles to take home so you don't have to worry about your current car struggling through another season. Come check out their lot just north of 48th and Layton and find your next ride. As your fall schedule gets busy, you'll need a reliable way to get to your destinations. Mullen Motors.
No taglines, just quality vehicles. Mullen Motors.
I'm softball player Jordy Ball, and I'm proud of my Nebraska roots, and I'm proud to be back home. And at Midwest Bank, they're proud to be your local community bank. They believe in family first, taking initiative, showing integrity, and rolling up their sleeves to support their local communities. They treat everyone like family, no matter where you're from. Whether you walk into a branch in York, Lincoln, Norfolk, or Pierce, you know you're going to be welcomed with a smile. Your community, your bank, Midwest Bank.
Looking for a place to relax and unwind after a busy day? Cigars Lounge at 8th and Q in the Haymarket is the perfect place to enjoy good company, a cocktail, and of course a cigar. Visit Cigars Lounge on Tuesdays for Top Shelf Tuesday and enjoy 50% off select spirits. Cigars Lounge offers Perdomo, San Cristobal, Rock Patel, and more of the top stogie brands that you know and love. But that's not all. If you mention this ad between noon and 5 p.m., you'll receive 15% off your entire tab just by mentioning the ticket. Check out Cigars Lounge today at 8th and Q in the Haymarket.
All right, Rico, let's do the final checklist before we head out. We have a lot of people coming to the tailgate today.
I'm ready.
Burgers?
Check.
Chips?
Check.
Icy cold beer?
Check. Except this one.
I'm forgetting something. Wait a second. Where's the Führer's cheese spread?
I can't stop eating it.
Rico!
Relax. I always pack extra. It's the biggest hit of the tailgate.
For the best appetizer, party dip, and tailgate snack, load up on Führer's cheese spread today in most local grocery stores.
Back to the corner three on 93.7 The Ticket. Here is your host, Austin Oerman.
One final time for the night, it is the corner three. Big thanks again to Jon Walker of the Omaha World Herald for joining me and Eric Strickland. I'm Austin Oerman here, your host on the corner three, Friday nights from 6 to 7 here on The Ticket, 93.7 The Ticket, ticketfm.com. Our free worldwide app for your phone, streaming live thanks to Starter Human Jewelers on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, as well as Allo Channel 961. Keep your thoughts rolling in on Twitter because I'm with the CHI Health Center with some time to answer them right now. So it's going to be fun being in the building officially tomorrow. So past Austin is telling you where future/present Austin's going to be. I'm not going to get into time travel. We don't have time for that. No pun intended. Key matchups for tonight. We heard some of that in the talk with John. Couple key trends here. Creighton allows opponents to shoot three-pointers 43.8% of the time, but teams are only shooting 28% against Creighton when it comes to the three-point line. Why is that important? Because Nebraska is not a high-volume or high-efficiency three-point shooting team. Huskers only taking 21.5 threes per game. Not very many, even for a team that doesn't shoot them well like Nebraska. And when I say doesn't shoot it well, Huskers still below 30%, still below 26% at 25.5% from three, 5.5 out of 21.5 are the average numbers, but 22 of 86 is what Nebraska is shooting from three this year. Things have been better at the free throw line. Huskers shooting just about 80%, but Creighton does a pretty darn good job of defending without fouling. They'll force a decent amount of mid-range shots and funnel a lot into Ryan Kalkbrenner in the middle. We'll get into why that might matter here once I tell you that Nebraska is allowing a similar rate of three-pointers. 46.7% of opponent shots have come from three. Teams are shooting 35.4% from three against Nebraska. Some of that is, of course, due to St. Mary's, right? High-volume, high-efficiency game from three for the Gales. But there have been a couple common opponents for Nebraska and Creighton. Blue Jays handle Fairleigh Dickinson fairly easy, and so does Nebraska. And we saw Nebraska have a darn difficult time putting away the Vaqueros of UT Rio Grande Valley. Creighton had an even harder time. Nebraska ends up winning that game by 20. Creighton only won that game by single digits. We know that playing an opponent like Rio Grande Valley will drive up some three-point numbers, but Creighton has done a little bit better but still comparable job to Nebraska of getting teams off the three-point line, and I really think that's going to be key for Nebraska in tonight's matchup. We saw against St. Mary's, for everything that the Gales messed up on, right? Turned the ball over a little bit during the run, shot horrendously on free throws, barely over 50%. They made up for it by being efficient from three. And we know the Creighton mantra is let it fly. Nebraska has to find ways to stay attached to shooters on the perimeter, right? As Stephen Ashworth comes to mind, Pop Isaacs, Jemiah Neal as well. Even when, Jackson McAndrew gets in the game, when Mason Miller gets in the game, Jason Green to a lesser extent. But the game plan for Nebraska won't be the UConn game plan against Purdue, but I think Nebraska needs to bust that out at times. If you think back to last year's national championship game, what did UConn allow to happen? They said, Zach Edey, go feast. Get yours. Put up your numbers, put up your points, grab your rebounds, whatever. We're not going to let Purdue, we're not going to let you spray out to shooters that are going to hurt us. We're not going to give you inside-out game. We're going to give you inside game. We're going to stay attached to shooters around the perimeter. We're going to fight over screens, fight through screens, whatever it takes. And if a shooter does catch it, we're going to run him off the three-point line, right? We're going to make him take a mid-range shot. That's something enforcing mid-range shots Nebraska was pretty darn good at last year, all things considered. That's the shot a lot of defenses, especially in the modern game, are more willing to give up now than ever. Not the rhythm ones, right? But if you run a good shooter off the three-point line, make him take a couple dribbles, show help with the big man, but don't come all the way out to guard it. Creighton, that's kind of been their defensive strategy, but people like to get all the way to the rim and still challenge Ryan Kalkbrenner, who's a multiple-time Big East Defensive Player of the Year winner. What I think is most likely to happen is that Nebraska sticks with its current defensive philosophy, right? Straight up against the big man until he catches it. Then on the catch, you bring someone baseline from the weak side to trap and force a decision. Kalkbrenner's not an elite passer. That's definitely something he needs to make strides in, but he's certainly gotten better since he first took the floor for Creighton as a freshman. I don't want to tell Fred Hoiberg, I don't want to tell Nate Lenzer, Ernie Ziegler, Adam Howard, that crew had to do their jobs, but I really think the way that Nebraska would have more success against Creighton is not necessarily enforcing Kalkbrenner to be a passer, but force him to be a scorer. And this is the guy that put up a wildly efficient over 90% performance from the floor on his way to 49 points earlier in the year, right? Like, I get it. Ryan Kalkbrenner can put the ball in the basket. But if Nebraska can limit Kalkbrenner from outside, if they can force him onto the interior and then say, okay, go get your two, I think that's the best way for Nebraska to keep up because, again, Nebraska shooting less than 26% from three on the year. If Creighton starts bombing away, Nebraska's going to run into the same math problem that it did against St. Mary's. Nebraska can't afford to let Creighton get hot from three, so I would have Nebraska stick to shooters running around the perimeter, go over every screen, funnel a lot to Braxton Mia. If he's in the game, he's going to start the game. But I really think that for Nebraska to best do that, it's going to be a big night from Andrew Morgan. If he can provide some resistance on the interior, probably the most traditional post defender Nebraska has on the roster, a little shorter than Kalkbrenner, but who isn't nowadays. I really think Andrew Morgan's performance defensively in the post could swing things for Nebraska if the perimeter guys stay attached. We'll get to a couple of those matchups here shortly. The other thing to watch is turnovers. Like always, Nebraska's been harping on turnovers, saying, nope, we can't afford to do it. We're not a good enough shooting team to just give possessions away at the rate we have. Creighton hasn't forced a lot of turnovers. Only about 13.5% of their defensive possessions have ended with a forced turnover. On the flip side, Nebraska's forced a turnover almost a quarter of the time at 23.7% of defensive possessions. But both teams will commit turnovers at a similar rate, right about 18% for both teams. Now, Creighton gets away with it a little bit more than Nebraska because of the math issue, because they're a better shooting team from three, and because Kalkbrenner is more efficient inside than what we've seen from Nebraska so far. Creighton can, afford a few more turnovers, but they can get away with a few more, right? Nebraska either has to be elite at forcing turnovers, right? At really jumping passing lanes, at hounding ball handlers. Or Nebraska probably has to play a little bit more like Creighton, right? Sit back in drop coverage, allow mid-range, allow Kalkbrenner to go to work, but you can't let Creighton shooters go off. You absolutely can't. Couple key matchups for tonight. I mentioned it in the first segment, the Sam Griesel game of his life. Raleigh Wooster versus Stephen Ashworth. Point guard versus point guard, ball handler versus ball handler. Griesel had a size and weight advantage when Creighton put a guard on him, right? Griesel was Nebraska's point guard. Raleigh Wooster is going to have the ball in his hands quite a bit to initiate for Nebraska. How he navigates the pick and roll, how he chooses to attack Ryan Kalkbrenner is going to be huge. You could say the same for Bryce Williams. We'll see if Nebraska utilizes its post and more pick and roll, if they try to drag Kalkbrenner out to the perimeter. But what Nebraska might be able to do in taking a page out of the 2022 playbook is invert the floor, is have your big man out on the perimeter, run some two-man game on whichever side of the floor, right, for Raleigh Wooster. Honestly, I would say you go down the left side of the floor or run the pick and roll so he ends up on the left side of the floor. That way, he can back Stephen Ashworth down into the post, and then he's got his right hand available to him to make a skip pass if help comes, to make the right read. You're probably more comfortable bringing the ball down with your right hand, but then that gives you your left hand available if you go middle. So to me, what Nebraska can do with Raleigh Wooster is run some two-man game, whether it's Braxton Mia, whether it's Andrew Morgan, or whether it's Berkay Boyuktengel at the 5. I think Nebraska can invert the floor, similar to 2022. If they're going to do that, which big man should they use? I don't think there's much of an argument for Braxton Mia in this case, at least offensively. Kalkbrenner's going to completely ignore him if he's at the top of the key. He's going to sink back even if he's at the free throw line where that screen was set sometimes for Nebraska in 2022. To me, I think if you have the playmaking big and Berkay Boyuktengel setting the screen where he can drive from the top of the key, potentially shoot it and force Kalkbrenner out to him. Same with Andrew Morgan, right? Maybe not the best shooter, but certainly a better shooter than Braxton Mia, a guy that you feel comfortable with taking a couple dribbles from the top of the key to make a play. Or if you have action going on the far side of the court, running some three-man action, a double stagger screen, whatever it is, a flare, depending on how you want to run it, you can still create some room for Andrew Morgan to navigate in the lane, take up attention of help defenders, maybe draw Kalkbrenner's eyes. Raleigh Wooster is not at his best when he's a scorer, but you would say the same for Sam Griesel. I do think there's an opportunity for Raleigh Wooster to put up, 15, 18, 20 points and help Nebraska by slowing the game down, making sure they get a higher quality look with a 6'3", 200-pound guard matched up against one that's 6'1", 170. Speaking of Berkay Boyuktengel, how does he match up against Creighton's power forwards? Because I assume Nebraska will start him at the 4 with Braxton Mia at the 5. So early on in the game, probably early in the second half, it's going to be Boyuktengel against Creighton's power forwards. There's a lot of different guys that do different things well, whether it is, say Jackson McAndrew, whether it's Mason Miller, whether it's Jason Green. There's all sorts of guys that Berkay Boyuktengel could be matched up against. I think Jason Green is the best matchup for Boyuktengel. Problem is, he's not the primary option for Creighton, right? McAndrew is such a good floor spacer. There's a reason he's I still believe, the highest rated recruit in Creighton history. Boyuktengel is going to have to chase him around the perimeter. Can he stay engaged? Is he in shape to chase these guys all over the court for, 28, 30 minutes that I think Nebraska is going to need him to play? And then how does that matchup work on the other end of the floor? I think Berkay Boyuktengel will give some stuff up to Creighton on the perimeter. Not because he's not capable, not because he's not athletic enough. I worry about the focus. I think Creighton's going to target him thinking that their power forwards can run. But then Creighton's power forwards aren't very good defensively. They're just not. Maybe this is a Berkay Boyuktengel game. Whether he's at the 4 or at the 5, can Nebraska play through him the way they played through Derek Walker, or even, what they wanted to do with Rink Mass against Creighton that didn't really come to fruition last year? I think that Nebraska can park Boyuktengel on the block, let him be that hub, put him at the elbow, or can you get him with a head of steam from the top of the key like we saw a couple times against St. Mary's? It was Boyuktengel going right into Mitchell Saxon a couple times and finishing, so I think that's there. And then, the final matchup, who guards Bryce Williams? had a couple near 30-point performances for Bryce Williams. I think that if Nebraska puts this game on his shoulders, things haven't gone that well. I think if Bryce Williams has the same sort of game that Keisei Tominaga did last year, you get a pretty similar result, except this time it's going to be in the Hornets' nest, or I guess the Blue Jays' nest there at the CHI Health Center. It'll probably be Jemiah Neal to start right at 6'6". He's probably the truest prototypical wing that they can stick on Bryce Williams. But will they go with some smaller, quicker guys, right? Bryce Williams has improved his handle, still not perfect. Do they put a smaller, quicker guy on him, knowing that Bryce Williams is used on the perimeter a lot, that he'll get the ball and screen and roll a lot? Do you put, a Pop Isaacs on Bryce Williams for any extended period of time, or do you worry that, hey, Nebraska, when they see this matchup, is going to go feed Bryce Williams in that mid to low post and let him go to work there? Those, to me, are the three key matchups, and that's going to put a bow on the show. Stick with us. We'll bring you some 93.7 The Ticket content. Then I'll be back for a little bit of a post-game wrap-up. Don't forget, follow the show right underneath me at Austin_Oerman. Tweet at me. Give me your comments. Give me your questions. As always, appreciate you for listening. It's been a fun show. We'll call it a show here, and we'll talk to you soon.